Alright, so today we're going to be looking at drawing profiles. We'll examine the structure of the head and pick up some tips and techniques for making profiles look good as opposed to strange like Bad Profile Dude. A Bad Profile Dude here is intended to demonstrate or illustrate, since he's an illustration, some of the common mistakes made when drawing a profile of a face. Alright, so let me point out the common mistakes illustrated by Bad Profile Dude. Now, the first one is the eye. The eye here is drawn as though it were facing directly at you rather than a side view, which it should be for a profile. The second common error illustrated by Bad Profile Dude is the complete lack of a forehead, or the forehead just being too short. Too short. Another common error that we run into when drawing heads from the side is to not make the skull big enough. The skull actually extends way past the ear, but in this one, it's not. And another common error, now I'm talking of course about doing more or less realistic profiles. If you're doing cartoons, which Bad Profile Dude is definitely a cartoon, you can break all the rules, and in fact it can be rather amusing to do so. That's why he's actually kind of a fun little guy, even though he breaks all the rules. Anyway, the the other common error is to make the lips too long, like they go too far back, and much too flat, and in this case also pointy. So yeah, those guys are not realistic. One more common error is to misplace the ear. In this case, the ear is far too low. But of course, it's hard to tell if it's too low when everything else is also misarranged, but you get the idea. Something else that's very important when you're doing a profile is to get the shape of the nose right. The shape of this guy's nose, definitely not right. And then again, there's the shape of the front of the face, the chin in particular, the way everything should curve together, and it doesn't in this picture, and the way the jaw curves. Yeah, I guess he could smoke under the shower. This guy. Anyway, those are some of the common mistakes that we'll hopefully rectify today as we study how to draw profiles. And by the end of this, you'll have a pretty good idea of how to do the lips, the nose, the eyes, everything, and make them look at least good. You know, whether you can do a likeness or not is something else, but I'm not generally too concerned with likenesses myself, but I do like to draw faces that look realistic. Even if they're comic faces, I still like them to have, you know, some element of realism to them. Okay, so this is obviously a side view of a human skull. And we're going to take a few minutes here to look at the structure of the skull first before we look at the head with actual flesh on it, because it'll be instructive, and it always helps to know what's under the skin before you go to draw what's over the skin, or what is the skin. So what we'll look at here is some of what I consider the landmarks, the places to look on a head when you're drawing it from the side, parts that you have to get right or it's just not going to work, and parts that kind of help you when you're thinking about it to put the pieces where they belong. Okay, so the first landmark, the spot that I usually start thinking about it when I'm drawing a profile, is the area of the brow. Now if we look at the brow area here on this skull, we can see that it has a definite curve shape. It comes down from the forehead, curves in a little, and then starts to curve out where the nose will be. Now the nose itself, of course, doesn't have much bone in it. It's mostly cartilage, but it will extend out from this area, and that's where the nose will go. so we can get an idea, just from the skull of where the nose will appear. The next part that I always look at is the eye socket. Get the eye socket placed on the head, and I'm going to show you later exactly how to actually do this without tracing over anything. But for now, we're just going to look at where does this eye socket fit compared to where the brow is. The eye socket is always a little bit back from the brow and then extends back in a sort of mushed up C into the head. So you figure out where the brow is, you go back a little bit, and then the eye socket will be kind of a C shape there. I want to look at the sort of the landmarks from a vertical direction, so we get kind of an idea of how things line up, because it's very important when you're drawing a profile to have things line up correctly. Notice that the nose sticks out in front, the chin is always back behind, the lips of course would go over these teeth. This guy doesn't have any lips, so we can't really measure them, but you still get the idea of what's underneath, that there's always this curve there. I'll draw the curve to see what you're talking about. And then if we look at where the lips would line up, where the edge of the nose is, we can get an idea of where those things line up as well. Let me draw some lines here to illustrate that. Okay, so from an underlying structure point of view, we have a general idea of what's underneath the skin there. The last thing to look at is the jawline itself and how it goes back and up and how big the skull is. So let's look at that too. The ear will always come back at the end of this jawline. The jawline in general points to the ear. So the ear will go right in here. And the skull itself extends back beyond the ear, and the neck attaches at the back of the skull. So when you're attaching the neck, it's always going to be behind the ear, and then the skull will go up and around farther behind like that. The front of the neck, of course, hooks up underneath the jaw, and there's always a little bit of a curve there because of some of this extra stuff in here. It's very soft, mostly cartilage and what have you for the esophagus and neck muscles in there, but there's always a little bit of a curve where it attaches and then it moves down. Alright, so let's do a little bit of a rough measurement here on where the features go based on where the whole head is. If we consider the head to be an oval shape, the top of the head is up there, and about halfway down is where the eyes go, like so. You can see that the center of the eye is approximately halfway between the top of the head and the bottom of the chin. And if you then take the bottom half between the eyes and the chin and divide that into 3 parts, the nose will go at the upper third and the lips at the second third there. So you can generally divide that into 3 parts and get the approximate location for the nose and the lips. Actually, I think that bone underneath there is just a chicken bone that he ate during dinner. Okay. Yeah, it's chicken bone. Alright, so let's stop for a minute for questions before we go to the next part where we're going to put skin on this. Actually, this is a female, so we're going to put skin on her. Any questions first? Okay then, I guess there's no questions. We'll move on now. This is the same person now with their flesh attached. Looks much more attractive this way, doesn't she? Now let's examine this again from the standpoint of the entire head with actual skin on it. But the measurements are still about the same. That's why I went through all that, to understand what's underneath there so you can get an idea of what's going to be above. So let's measure this off again from the point of view of the front here. Okay, so I've drawn like all of the basic measurements that I make when I'm doing a profile. Now let me explain them. From the top of the head to the bottom of the chin, that's our first measurement. And then if we take half of the distance between there, we get the point at where the eye should go. Then if we take the distance from the eye to the bottom of the chin and split that into 3, we get the tip of the nose and the middle of the lips. Notice that the nose sticks out the farthest, then the upper lip, then the bottom lip, then the chin when you're looking at the front part of the face. Alright, so let's move on. Let's notice the back edge of the nose is ahead of the back edge of the lips, but not by very much, and both of them are still in front of the eye. Note that the back corner of the lip just about lines up with the front edge of the eye. Then if we look at the ear is placed, generally speaking, the top edge of the ear lines up with the top of the eye, and the bottom edge of the ear lines up with about the bottom of the nose. And there's also the flow of the jaw up into the corner of the ear. The jaw always points up at the bottom of the ear. And then measuring from the front to the back of the skull, the ear is about halfway, a little more than halfway back, the front part of the ear. Now let's take a few minutes to look more closely at the exact curves that occur at the front of the face. Let me get rid of all these measurement lines. But first let's see if there's any questions so far on the measurement lines and the basic landmarks. These are all just things you have to memorize. You know, you have to think about them, you have to know where they are, and then you can start drawing faces much more easily. I will sing about the top curve of the lip. How's that? Yeah, actually we're going to get into the actual curves on the front of the profile here in a minute. Right now we're just figuring out where to put everything. You didn't have to type that part. As for the question about age, things do move around a little bit in age. They tend to sag more, of course, and there'll be more wrinkles and stuff. But the basic measurements don't actually change much because the skull remains the same. Now children, that's another whole thing. They have much bigger heads compared to their body, and the features are kind of scrunched more down inside. But we're not going to go into the differences between children and adults right now. We're just looking at adults. By the way, if you want to avoid the whole sagging thing as you get older, you should spend most of your time upside down, because it's all gravity's fault. All right, any more questions? Any more questions before we get rid of some of these lines and look at the actual curves? You can hear it now, Dr. Tozy. Wow, look at the bag on that baby. Okay, that's my sense of humor. Let's get rid of that. All right, let's get rid of these lines for a minute and look at some of these curves and where the features fit and stuff like that. Just try to, watch this, think about it, put these things into your mind and start thinking about where things are and remembering, memorizing all these little points. It seems like a lot at first, but it's kind of your roadmap for drawing a profile. All right, actually, you're cracking me up more, PK, trying to keep up with my mumbling. Okay, anyway, when I draw a profile, I kind of like to start with the brow and the eyebrow and the eye and figure out those parts. We will actually, of course, after we get through all of this measurement stuff and landmarks and what have you, we're going to draw one without anything behind it. Right now we're just trying to fix our minds on all these pieces and get it into our heads. Okay, so let's look at the brow on this girl here. Notice that it curves in a little bit, comes down from the forehead, curves in, and there's a pretty serious curve out to the nose. So let's just draw that line first. So there's the curve of the nose right there. I got the little arrow pointed at it. And the eyebrow comes right behind that. It's always in there behind, never sticks out in front. Well, it might, I guess, if you're the Hulk, but otherwise, no. And then it's important to note that there's always this dip back. The eye socket is sunken back into the face. The eyes are up, inside, underneath the bone, so that they're in a protected position. The brow protects the eye, and the cheekbone protects the eye. So the eye is back inside the head. Then the eye socket, as you might remember from the skull, the eye socket is kind of a warped C shape, and it always starts back here, back behind the nose. And the eyeball itself, of course, is inside the eye socket, and it goes right around in here. And you'll see when I draw a profile freehand that I use this same concept to help me construct the correct positions and stuff. So now I've got my eyeball inside the eye socket, and we can see that the eyelids go up and around the eyeball. And it's very important when you draw the eyelids that they should curve around the eyeball. I tend to think of the top eyelid sort of like an awning on a store or something, the way that it comes out, hangs up over the window, over the eye, curves around a little bit, and has a curvy shape on the top, something like an awning. Then the bottom lid also curves around the eyeball, and it comes up to meet the upper lid. Note that at the corner, the upper lid extends past, so the lower lid comes up and meets the upper lid before the upper lid ends. And then the rest of the lower lid is usually not that well defined. There'll be just a little bit of a shadow as it curves around underneath the eye. Alright, so to reiterate what we've done so far, we have the curve of the brow down to the nose and out, the nose projects out. We go in from the brow to find the eyebrow. We go in from the eyebrow to find the eye socket. We put the eye inside the eye socket, and then we draw the lids over it. Okay, so let's stop there for a moment. Any questions so far on the basic structure of the eye from the side? Alright, well then let's move on. Yes, dissecting cow eyes. That's a good way to learn anatomy. Yeah. I remember having to do that. Alright, so let's look at the nose. The way the nose curves out from the face, the tip of the nose the way it usually is. So let's look at that curve a little bit. Notice that the upper curve coming out from the brow is pretty steep. There's quite a bit of curve there. And then it stops and it starts to turn down, but it doesn't ever go vertical. Like there's a little curve there, and then it always tilts up from the lip, and there's a curve under the nose that goes to the lip. Let me show you what I mean there. Now, of course, this is on a female with a nice tilted up nose. It is possible, noses come in many shapes, for the tip of the nose to curve down or do all kinds of other things. But just as a general rule, and we're talking about female face here, the nose tilts up like that. And then notice where the nostril is. The nostril is, above the end of the nose and comes back in a curvy shape. And then the wing of the nose, there's usually a little curve or a little dip there that you can see. In this picture, it's just a little bit of shadow. A lot of times on a cartoon, that's all you'll do. Just a little bit of indication of where the nostril is and a little indication of where the edge of the wing is. Now we move down to the lips. This is an important part to notice because this is often drawn wrong. The tilt of the upper lip is very, it tilts down a lot. It's not straight in any way. And it's important to get this tilt correctly. Notice also that the place where the two lips meet also tilts down, not quite as much as the upper part of the upper lip, but it's still a downward line. Also notice that the upper lip sticks out farther than the lower lip. Just a little, but it's important that that be that way. If they're equal, or if the lower lip sticks out farther, it will look strange. Note that the lower lip as it comes down is almost vertical. It's very close to vertical. It has a little curve to it, of course, but it starts out vertical and then it curves in to the corner of the mouth. And then under the lower lip there's always a little bit of a curve as it comes in and then back out to the chin. So it's important that you get that little bit of a curve in there as you connect the lower lip to the chin. Yeah, I'll try to keep the guides and post the whole thing later as part of the work in progress. Maybe I can try to do that. I'll save it and try to keep them. I think I still have the measurement ones somewhere here too. Then also, let's continue on with the curve of the chin. It goes up, back to the ear, and then the ear. And then we connect the neck. There's a little bit of curve in the front, like we said. And the back of the neck always comes up to the back of the skull, which is significantly behind the ear. Not right at the ear, behind the ear. Okay, so let's stop there now that we've got all of this stuff in our heads, hopefully, or at least I've shown it all to you and you have a place to start. Let's see if there's any questions, and then we'll try to use all this information to actually construct a decent profile without anything behind it. We'll just draw one. Any questions first?